All right, welcome back. So today we are going to be again going over the slope formula, and we're going to be talking about how to find the slope or calculate the slope between 2 points when we are not given a graph. As we recall, when we are given a graph, we can just count our rise and our run. We can count how many units we go up or down compared to how many we go to the right, and that finds our slope. But if we're not given a graph, we have to do some calculations. So without further ado, let's go over the slope formula again. So you should copy this down. If it's here, you should be copying this down. So recall the slope formula is slope is equal to y sub 2 minus y sub 1 divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Remember, the 1s and the 2s don't have any mathematical value. What they do is they give us some names. They are what's called a subscript. And what they do is they tell us, oh, this is the first, this is the second. We don't use these as powers. We do not square anything with these. These are going to be the names of specific points. And below, written down in those words, that's what they actually mean. The slope is equal to the y value of the second point minus the y value of the first point divided by the x value of the second point minus the x value of the first point. So if I were to connect these for you, the y value of the second point, that's our y sub 2, minus the y value of the first point, that's our y sub 1, x value of the second point, that's our x sub 2, and the x value of the first point, that's our x sub 1. So that's what they mean verbally. That is how we would verbally say it. The y value of the second point minus the y value of the first point, or the difference in our y's, and over the x value of the second point minus the x value of the first point, or the differences in x's. Remember, slope is equal to the change in y over the change in x. So all we're doing is just formalizing it. We're just saying, okay, I have 2 points. I'm going to find the difference between them. So without further ado, let's take this and put it into some play. We're going to find the slope between coordinate points 1, 2 and 4, 5. So when we do this, I still, to this day, will always write out the slope formula. So it's m is equal to y sub 2 minus y sub 1, the y value of the second point minus the y value of the first point, divided by the x value of the second point minus the x value of the first point. After we write that, we want to label. We go back up to our coordinate points. We have 1, 2 and 4, 5. We're going to identify the x and the y values. Remember, it's always x, y. It's never going to change. It's always x, y in an ordered pair. If we have a coordinate point, an ordered pair, those are the same thing. It's always x, y. So we're going to go in, we're going to identify 1 is the x, 2 is the y, 4 is the x, 5 is the y. So now we need to figure out what's the first point and what's the second point. Well, 1, 2, that's the point that appears first. So let's call that the first point. And 4, 5 is the point that appears second. So let's call that the second point. So we're going to go back in. That x is going to turn to x sub 1. The y turns to the y sub 1. The 4 is our x sub 2. 5 is our y sub 2. So now all we have to do is simply plug it back in. That's it. So we have y sub 2, the y value of our second point. What value was that? Let's go back to our ordered pair. Oh, that's 5. Minus, it's always minus, because we're finding the difference. We now look at the first point. What's the y value there? Oh, it's 2. That's divided by the x value of the second point. I look for that. That was 4 minus the x value of the first point, which is 1. We can simplify. We get 3 over 3, which is just equal to 1. Awesome. Let's keep it going. Let's find the slope between these 2 points, 0, 1 and 10, 8. So again, we're going to write our slope formula every single time. That's not an exaggeration. You're going to be writing it every single time. So we look at our coordinate points, 0, 1, 10, 8. We want to identify the x and the y values and then go in and replace them with the first x value, the first y value, second x value, second y value. The coordinate point 0, 1 is the first one that appears. So I'm going to label that as my x sub 1, my y sub 1. 10, 8, that's the second point. I'm going to label that x sub 2, my y sub 2. Because remember, it's the x value of the first point, the x value of the second point. So now that we have identified, all we need to do is substitute in. Wherever we see our y sub 2, we're going to look back at our coordinate points. What value represents y sub 2? Well, that's 8. That's a poorly drawn 8. Let's try that one more time. Ugh. Come on. That's not fantastic, but it'll do. All right, minus now y sub 1. What's the y value of the first point? Well, look to see where you see y sub 1. Yeah, so it's the value of 1. If you have these identified, written out, there shouldn't be that much trouble to substitute it in. If you're not labeling and if you're not writing out the slope formula, you're going to have a more difficult time. Take the extra 10 seconds to identify what your x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2 is. Take the time. It will help. Trust me. Now we're going to find our x sub 2. Our x sub 2 we had is 10, minus our x sub 1, which is 0. 8 minus 1 is 7. 10 minus 0 is 10. We cannot simplify. Awesome. We got one more example here, folks. Let's find the slope between -2, 3 and -4, -7. All right, again, as always, we're going to write out our slope formula. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1, or verbally, the y value of the second point minus the y value of the first point over x sub 2 minus x sub 1, translated to the x value of the second point minus the x value of the first point. Let's go in. Let's identify my x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. Well, the first coordinate point that appears is -2, 3. So -2 is my x sub 1, 3 is my y sub 1. The second point is -4, -7. So that's my x sub 2, y sub 2. And again, now all we need to do is substitute in these values. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1. My y sub 2 is -7 minus y sub 1, which is 3. Again, it's always minus. We're finding the difference. X sub 2, which is -4, minus x sub 1, which is -2. Now we can simplify. -7 minus 3 more is -10. -4 minus -2 is -2. Guess what? We can simplify this down. First off, our negatives are going to cancel out because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So we end up with the slope of +5. Awesome job today, folks. Keep up the great work, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.